it is time to bring in some purple haze. Turn out the lights. Of course, it's not going to work. Here we go. There we go. All right. What do you think about some purple haze and some family law after dark? Well, okay. So let's get started. So I've got 5 different scenarios. Let's try to move through them quickly because we've been recording for 2.5 hours now. At some point, all good things must come to an end. But this person wants legal advice. So she says, so we have 2 very small children, but I'm looking to get a divorce. I'm not ready to do this quite yet until we are out of the newborn infant stage. I'm a stay-at-home mom with no car or job. I'm in counseling and was recommended to look into getting legal advice to prepare. I don't even know where to start, as I clearly have a lot going. What advice do you have for me? Well, it's really not that much. Like, you want to get a divorce? All right. I mean, my initial question is like, are you sure you want to get divorced? Every consultation that I have for a prospective family law client begins like, all right, so how sure are you that this isn't going to like flip in like 6 months? Because I've had cases, I know, as have you, where people are in like months into a divorce and like, we're just kidding. And they dismiss. So at this point, a couple of small children, infant stage, newborn stage, which is difficult, mostly on the mom, because chances are, just statistically speaking, she's going to be one stuck with rearing the children, breastfeeding and all of that kind of thing. Where are you going to go? And what kind of setup are you going to have for your newborn? Because newborns require a very specific environment in terms of like a safety equipment. And, I don't know if she's breastfeeding, maybe she has like a pump that she needs to have access to. Maybe she needs to not be working because she's on maternity leave. I don't know. But there's a lot that goes into raising a 1 and a 2-year-old. Now you add on to all of that. Now you're going through a divorce and dealing with custody and visitation issues. Oh, it is so much. And it sucks because the judge has to make orders in the custody and visitation scenario. What visitation does the dad have? And then mom is almost always, without like 99% of the time, going to say, well, I just don't want the baby to be overnight because I breastfeed. And then like at 3 a.m, the child wakes up and I have to go feed them. And then the attorney representing dad will be like, there's formula. There's like, she could freeze her breast milk. She could do different things. Dad's just going to have to get used to it. If he wants to have overnights, this is the kind of the schedule he's going to have to adopt. Needs of a newborn are different from needs of a 3-year-old or different from needs of a teenager. And so all of that is going to have to be navigated. Do you really want to do all of that in the family law context? Because that really sucks. What do you think, Ileana?
Oh my God. I mean, I'm also looking into if she's probably taking care of the 1 and 2-year-old, she's probably not going to be able to work, or if she has to work, she has to find childcare, and then there goes if the dad doesn't want to pay, or if whatever spousal support is not going to be enough to be able to afford to live
Do
separately.
you know how much daycare costs in the state of California?
Super expensive.
I am paying daycare. I am 100% paying daycare. I pay a nanny to come to my house and watch my children. And I don't even know how much to pay. It's something like a couple $1,000s a month or something like that. It's not cheap.
It's not. I've seen people pay.
There's not a lot of people that could afford $2,000 a month on top of rent and utilities and bills and all these things.
$2,000 is cheap. Like I was talking to a friend recently, same scenario like you. They have a nanny that comes to the house, and they are in almost $4,000 a month.
It's expensive. And never mind that. I have a kid that's about to go to college. College is expensive. Jesus Christ. I'm like halfway motivated. Say, you know what? You don't need college. You don't need college. Just start a business. Go do a TikTok channel or something. But it's expensive. And you think about like, we're going to pay for your college education. Shit. You know how much they cost. I mean, student loans are a real thing. There's one thing to, pay for your child's college education, and then there's another thing that have them become an indentured servant to the United States government because of student loans, which you and I are indentured servants. But there is a, you know, for one child, I'm starting to think about, I got a 3 and a 4, she's 5 now, 4 and a 5-year-old. They're going to go to college at the same time.
Oh, yes.
I need to start making some money. Jesus. Because if not, I'm like subjecting them to this life of indentured servitude to the government that, you know, I mean.
Start having them apply for scholarships since now.
Yeah. And you put money away now.
Yeah.
Every month.
But I'd rather go to Italy. I'd rather like take a trip to Rome, you know. I'd rather just go globetrotting with my wife, you know. But hey, we got these kids. We got to pay for them now. That's kind of the cost. And so I'm getting off track. Newborn infant stage. Newborns are expensive. Newborns are scary. Think about the formula. Think about the diet. Think about all the doctor's visits. Think about the lack of sleep. Have you gotten to the point where your 7-month-old now is able to sleep through the night?
Oh, no. Yeah, the most she sleeps, I think, is like 4, 5 hours if I get lucky.
If you're lucky.
And
yeah.
then after that, it's every 2 hours.
I used to have the 2-hour shift thing where it's like, okay, we're putting to bed like at 8, but they're going to wake up at 10, and then every 2 hours after that, and we got to take turns. I hated that so bad. We bought like the snoo. I told you about the snoo, right? About this little carriage that like moves as they cry. But then I had it like on super like strong mode, so when Evelyn would cry, like rah, and then the thing would like jerk, and then after a couple minutes it would like jerk faster, and then Evelyn's like rrr. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's strangling the kid, it's scrambling the brain, we got to get her out of there right now.
Oh no.
I remember that. Are you sure this is good for her?
Oh, it was a thing. And then I was supposed to only have it for 12 months, but I never returned it. So I paid for like 36 months or something like that. And it was like $100 a month. I was so out of it and busy and just, I remember that stage. So now you want to add into all of that. Now you're getting a divorce on top of all of it. Is there any benefit to waiting? Yeah, there is.
There is, yes.
You don't have to worry about alternative housing and what, you know, additional support for your child, because presumably you have a dad that's ready and willing to help without the context of you guys are divorcing and now he hates you because you're divorcing him. And you guys are like War of the Roses, that movie in 1987 with Michael Douglas and what's that lady's name? You took me in the movie to see that. You took me as a 7-year-old to see that movie and the movies. And I was 7 and it was rated R. Mom, what the F were you thinking? That's like a porno.
You can't hold me accountable to that.
I can, and I do. War of the Roses with Michael Douglas and Danny DeVito, and I can't think of the lady's name. I remember seeing that as a 7-year-old and like why what is this? Naked ladies, what are they doing? Are they wrestling? Oh. There was like sex and murder and infidelities and
I don't recall. I think that was your dad who took you.
No, that was you. It was definitely not my dad. So, all right, here's my advice. If you want to get divorced now and you're not working, you stand to collect, assuming that you are not the breadwinner in the family. You stand to collect child support and alimony. 100%. You do. If you were collecting just guideline support in the state of California, that's what you would get. You would get his income versus your income, and you're making nothing. And so you're going to get some child support, you're going to get some alimony. And I'll guarantee you it's going to go something like this. Hey, we judge guideline child support in California by how much time you guys both spend with the child. It's like, okay, well, then I want 50-50. It's like, well, how are we going to make 50-50 work when I'm breastfeeding and doing all of these things? It's like, I don't know, I just want it. And then you guys are going to like do this like 2-2-3 schedule or week on, week off schedule, and it's going to suck. I've never seen a 50-50 schedule work for an extended period of time where it's like a 2-2-3, because somebody gets tired of it and then they just stop following it and they just start doing their own thing. You could order it, and they've had orders like that for years, but in actuality, are they actually doing this 2-2-3? Of course they're not, because it's ridiculous. Because people have lives and things that happen. I don't know. What's your experience with that, Eliana?
I've seen it work for short periods, and when I say short periods, like maybe 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And then they need to change it for some reason, either something with the kids, I don't know, school schedule changes, or the parents have, I don't know, a new job or something that it just doesn't work.
I had a 50-50 schedule with my eldest, and that lasted for like 6 months before it was like, you know what, we're just going to do whatever we're going to do. And then she just ended up living with me full time because it just made the most sense. School's right there, and, you know, we just didn't argue about it, and it was great. But the initial orders were like a 50-50 schedule. The clients that I've had that have gotten 50-50 schedules, it always starts out like the first 6 months they follow it, and then they just deviate into whatever they're going to normally do.
Exactly.
Because common sense kind of takes over. So my advice to her is you don't have to rush divorce. If you're not, if you are not in danger, if you are not the victim of domestic violence, if your child is not the victim of abuse or neglect, then why don't you just wait? Because you never know what could happen over the course of 12 months. Hey, because having a newborn sucks. There's an adjustment period for the woman and there's an adjustment period for the man. For the woman, it's like this newfound reality that you're not like ever going to be like you were before you had kids. Mom, you had like 5 kids. And you had me when you were 16. So that was a long time ago for you.
A long time ago.
But, you know, when you have multiple children like that, your body changes.
Yep.
And so if you're not lucky enough to be one of those that could recover from that easily, then you're going to forever have these scars and your body's going to change and whatever. Fine. It happens. And so women are going through all of this mental anguish, postpartum depression of what happens. And men are struggling to find, how do I reconnect with my wife now that like 80% of the time is being stolen by this little shit over here that's taking up all the time. And every time I want to hang out with the wife, she's all tired and always sickly and always angry and yelling at me. It's an adjustment period.
Yeah.
Maybe y'all don't need to get divorced right now. If things are still the same way in 2 or 3 years, then what's the harm of trying out to figuring out if you guys maybe have the inward fortitude to stick it out and become what your children deserve, which is these parents that have gone through difficult times and they've overcome and they've persevered. I got to tell you, man, I'm so sick of the current generation and their inability to deal with strife, with hardships, with obstacles, with all of these things. They're so quick. Oh, I need therapy. Oh, I need to do this. I have ADHD. Last week I did Uncle Omar, and this guy said, I have ADHD and major depressive disorder and all this other stuff and autism, and I have all this. It's like, why don't you just grow a pair and like, maybe you don't have all those things. Maybe everything's going to be just fine. Maybe you don't need all this medication. Maybe you don't need all this therapy, because back in the 60s and 70s, 40s and 30s, people were navigating this universe, going through all of the same stuff. And they remained married for 40, 50, 60 years and raised your little ass and your brothers and sisters and your grandchildren, or, well, your children, what are their grandchildren, because they knew that they had the ability to overcome adversity, as opposed to, oh, I feel neglected now, so now I'm depressed, and so now maybe that is grounds for divorce, because he's not everything that I thought he was going to be. He's not the Prince Charming, because he has poor hygiene, and he has bad motivation, and he's whatever. He's not telling me nice things all the time. Or maybe she's not bowing to my every whim. She doesn't have dinner ready every night I come home at 6 p.m., and she's not understanding of my needs and emotions, and so maybe she's not the right one for me. People are so quick to jump to divorce, as opposed to maybe we could just work through it. And then it's like, oh, do we need to get therapy? Maybe we need that. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't. I just read this book about I forget what it's called, but it's about the ills of over therapizing our youth. And it's like football coaches, sports coaches, like when they go to win the big games, like, you could overcome, you could persevere, you could just push farther, just push a little bit harder. It's going to hurt for a little bit, but you're going to keep on going. You're going to keep on going, and inevitably you're going to reach the end zone. You're going to score a touchdown. We're going to win the big game. All of these things. What they don't ask you is like, hey, so how do you feel about your parents getting divorced? They don't ask those questions because who gives a shit? In the moment, you have an objective and they preach towards completing the objective and you get the objective done. And then afterwards, you can be reflective. But so quickly are we to, prior to getting to that point, let's just put the kid in therapy. Like every solution that I've ever seen in all these family law cases is, oh, well, the child hasn't seen his dad in 3 months. Maybe we need reunification therapy. It's like, maybe we don't. Maybe we just need to just have them hang out at Chuck E. Cheese for a couple hours without any interference from mom or outside influences and let them reconnect on their own. I don't know. What do you think, Mom?
What I think is that, well, I didn't hear the grounds for her contemplating divorce.
She didn't list them.
Okay. So I would have to say to her, I mean, as you said, if she's not in any physical danger, or are the kids, and there is still somewhat some respect there, that, I mean, she's going, if she has infants right now, she's obviously going through some hormonal changes, and her husband is going through changes as well as accepting the 2 new kids, that she hold out and, you know, wait it out, see what happens.
What would you tell?
That's my opinion.
I agree with that. But what would you say, Ileana? This person comes into your office. What do you tell them?
I have had similar, I guess, consultations, and what I have told them is to try to stay in the house, of course, try to wait.
Well, what's the significance of that? Why would you tell them that?
Because if she leaves the house, she's going to struggle financially, even with a child and spousal support order. And it's just going to be a lot on top of having to deal with the infant children. And I mean,
she can't leave the kids, right? Because if
No.
she leaves the kids, what happens?
he's
Dad
gonna
gets
get
the
an
upper hand
Mhm.
in custody and visitation.
And I think, I mean, I will say 99% of the consultations that I have had in this situation, they're not thinking about leaving the kids, they're thinking about leaving with the kids.
Yeah.
But what I have seen a lot is this mental struggle of, okay, yes, I can stay here and in the house, and I can deal with being separated and not under the same roof, but I cannot deal with usually the infidelity or being seen as I'm being cheated on by everybody, and they struggle a lot with that. And that's why they're considering filing for divorce at this moment, because they want to end that emotional part, but financially it just doesn't make sense.
You know what's funny for the clients that I tell them, hey, you're just going to have to stick it out in the house, just live there. Like half the time it ends up resolving. It's like, hey, could we just dismiss the divorce? Yeah, sure. And then it does, because he forced people to just deal with their problems.
Right.
You don't need therapists. You don't need all these outside influence to help you get over anything. You have the internal fortitude to get over it yourself. You just need to have to stop being a bee and acknowledging that you're going to go through difficult things in your relationship, and not all of it has to be this catastrophic thing where it results in the end of your marriage.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the nowadays how people deal with the issues and problems, yes, I have to agree that sometimes they give up so easily, or they right away look into divorce. Now, I have to disagree in the part that I think there's a lot of situations that therapy is good, and I don't think that the reason why people seek therapy or marriages don't work nowadays is not necessarily because they don't put an effort. I think there was a lot of relationships back in the day that they lasted just because they didn't have an option. And not an option in the sense of making it work, but in the sense of the woman probably not being happy. But if they were not working and they were financially independent, depending on the other person, they had no other option than to stay in the marriage. And nowadays, I think it's more common for women to be like, you know what, I'm not gonna deal with that. I can go ahead and financially be financially independent and just go.
Yeah. I have
And
to
that's
agree
the-
with Ileana. I think I wouldn't put off therapy or counseling. I would definitely give it a shot, because it allows the spouse the opportunity to have somebody assist them in speaking for them so that they could hear what's going on.
So therapy is good.
Yes.
Therapy is a good thing,
Yeah.
but it could also be destructive. If you introduce, well, here's the thing. Here's my biggest problem with therapy is that it focuses so much on like these, what are your triggers? What are the things that make you emotionally distraught? What are the things that make you depressed? What are the things that make you angry? What are the things that make you scared? And then we just have to talk about everything. And what it focuses so much on is the source of the problem and not so much on, but it doesn't matter. You can still do what you got to do. You could succeed and be scared. You can succeed and be anxious, and you don't even have to identify it. One of the things that I took away, I'll tell you what, my mom, the way that I was raised, the way that I learned how to be what I am is in watching how my mom overcame her own adversities. When she had to get up at 6 a.m, she didn't complain about it. And when she had to work hard and when she had to do all these things and go through stuff to make sure that there was food on the table, she didn't really complain about it ever. And so when I was growing up, I found that distasteful to me to also complain about anything. Well, if she ain't complaining, I ain't gonna complain. I mean, I would complain, I'm sure, because I was like 6, 7, 8 years old. But it just gave me this insight that, hey, just because things sucks doesn't mean you don't still have to. Circumstance does not change responsibility.
Oh, yes.
Your responsibilities remain despite the circumstances that surround. That's what I learned from my mom. Just because it sucks for you doesn't mean that these kids don't still have to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom would do those things and it would suck. Sure, would therapy have helped her get over some of that stuff? Sure. But it had to have been in context of being able to overcome. You're going to overcome and deal with all of this, and afterwards you're going to be damaged mentally and you're going to have to deal with it. That's what men, that's what women, that's what successful people deal with. They sacrifice so much for the sake of success. And once they reach the top of the mountain, things are broken. And you fix those things that are already broken, but it doesn't prevent you from fixing your circumstance or adhering to your responsibilities or caring for your children or protecting your wife or doing all of these things. You fix what's broken so that you can fix yourself. That's important. But this idea that therapy is like this cure-all, that you're going to go here and it's going to be okay to be depressed and that's going to be the big excuse as to why you didn't excel to this, and that, is the disconnect that I have.
I don't think
It's not a cure-all.
Yeah.
No.
It's like, I don't think having to go to therapy, it's like an excuse to not be able to like succeed in life or like overcome whatever you're going through. I mean, I don't know if your experience with therapy, I have been in therapy and what I've gotten is not that where, oh, this is an excuse or I cannot do this because I don't know, I'm anxious or something like that. It has actually been the opposite. Like, it's okay to be, I don't know, anxious and continue doing what you need to do. And like,
I'll tell you my experience with therapy. Mm-hmm. So I was in therapy with my wife, mm-hmm. and I didn't like it. I was like, what is the point of this?
You know what?
What do you want me to talk about? It's like, do you want me to talk about how my mom didn't hug me when I was a baby? Do you want me to like give you this whole story about like what I didn't have any stories? I didn't give a shit about that. That's just stuff that I'd already worked out. It was more about my ability to express my own emotions, mm-hmm. which is probably true because there's times that I rewatch this show that we do, mm-hmm. and I'll feel myself like getting emotional about mm-hmm. stuff. On a rewatch, it's like, oh, nothing ever happened. Like, oh, I was not that emotional. It's like, oh, maybe I'm autistic, or maybe I've just trained myself to not express outwardly my emotions like every other man that's ever existed, because that was a thing. It still is a thing, toxic masculinity and all of that. So it helped me in expressing my emotive state to the females that I'm in charge of caring for, my wife and my girls. What it didn't help me do was advance in life, because a huge part of what I am was my ability to overcome and persevere amidst mental turmoil and emotional strife. That's a huge part of my character. I got a lot of that from my mom. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to tell somebody, when I tell my daughters, hey, you scraped your knee, but you're not going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Not everything has to be like a crying event.
Yes. Dramatic.
Like you scraped your knees, like, oh, did you die? No. Well, then you're all right. Once you rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine. That's how I grew up. It's just the way of the world. It's the way of my world. I'm trying to make it part of their world, to just say that you don't have permission to just fall all out and just 100% give in to your base instinctive emotion because you're hurt a little bit.
And I think that's psychology, because also if you go to therapy, there's going to be so many different approaches to therapy. There's, of course, the one where they go back into your childhood to see and pinpoint what went wrong and why you're the way you are now.
That was a whole basis of litigation in the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
Repressed memories.
Mm-hmm.
Before that was determined to not be a thing, there was a whole legal industry of frivolous lawsuits based about, hey, I had this repressed memory that I was sexually assaulted and I want to sue. And courts would entertain it. I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you, continue what you were saying?
Like, that's one approach. And then there's, of course, other approaches where, okay, we are in the present now. Let's see how we can learn how to communicate, or what is the purpose, I don't know, of the therapy.
Yeah.
And just like you mentioned, your daughter, where she scraped her knee and said, okay, nothing happened. There's also this other approach in therapy that it's okay for her to cry a little bit, get the emotions out, but then let's move on after that.
That's probably good, because there's no universe that exists in my mind where it would have ever been okay to cry. It was always, stop being a bitch, just get up and go. You know? Put a Band-Aid on, rub some dirt on it, and, you know, it's time to get on, you know. That was like, oh, Dominic, insert clip of that movie Friday when Debo was like, stop being a bitch and come on.
Stop being a bitch and come on.
Oh, it's just, that's the mentality that I grew up with. It was, and honestly, it was taught by my mom, because that's how her dad was. And my dad, to a very toxic masculinity scale, but the majority of my masculinity comes from my mom, which probably comes from my grandfather. And it's not a bad thing to eschew emotions for the sake of the greater good. It is a crime, however, to let yourself be so unraveled by your emotions that are undealt with and have it lead to a family annihilation, such as Christopher Watts. And I don't know anything about Christopher Watts. I don't know what's going on with that young man, but there's been a lot of speculation. We've got a lot of time to get into it now, but there's probably some unresolved insecurities that led him to believe, to behave in a certain way that would have never held any ground in somebody else. So we got a lot off topic, but to this young lady, it's like, why don't you just postpone that for a little bit?
Definitely.
Let us do another one. Okay, the question is, can my ex force me to keep our baby? What's the answer to that question, Eliana? Can my ex force me to have a child?
No. But to have, or like,
Is she pregnant?
yeah, exactly. Is she pregnant, or does she have the child already?
I haven't read this yet,
Okay. I'm confused.
but I'm just going to say right off the bat that no, that is an illegal contract, unenforceable even if it's in writing. The legal answer to that question is no, but let's see what this lady is getting at. Okay, so hi, I'm sorry if this isn't the right place, but I'm pregnant. She's a 15-year-old female. Jesus Christ. She's 34 weeks pregnant. That means she's about to have a child in about 4 weeks. I don't want it, but I found out late. Too late for an abortion. We live in Michigan. My ex-boyfriend is 16. I don't have the money for a lawyer or anything. Of course not. I'm going to put it up for adoption. I don't want it. I thought maybe I'd bond with it, but I just want it gone at this point. My OB has said I can get a C-section at 36 weeks if nothing else comes up, and that's what I'm going for. The issue is that recently my ex-boyfriend had decided he doesn't want me to get rid of it. He wants us to be a family and doesn't want me to get rid of this baby. Up until now, he has shown no want for the baby. I'm panicking. I don't want to keep the child. Nothing will make me want this baby. I want nothing more than not to have it. Can he force me to keep it? Can he keep it and force me to pay for it or something? I just want to pretend like it never happened. Have the baby, leave it at the hospital, heal and move on with my life. Is there anything I can do here to stop him from forcing me into life? The truth is, I don't know, Eliana, you do adoption law.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe without his consent she could agree to a legal adoption. What do you think?
I don't typically do these type of adoptions like from birth, so I don't know. But the little that I know is that I know it depends on the state whether or not you need
Yeah.
the consent of the other parent. There are some states that allow the mother to be the sole, like the one that decides, and there's others that require the other party. But her question is not so much like whether or not she could give up the child for adoption without his consent. It seems to me like where she is, that's allowed, is whether or not he can force her to, I guess, be involved with the child.
Well, the forcing would be essentially withholding his consent for adoption. That would be the legal basis to do so.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a state that required consent, then could he even consent being a minor? That's questionable. And then if that is eschewed to maybe his parents, then there's bigger issues. Now you got the grandparents involved. Now everything's screwed up. But there's also states out there where you could, no questions asked, have a child and just leave.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the case in her state.
Could be.
But the short story is, from a best interest of the child perspective, neither one of these parents are adults. Neither one of these parents presumably have the financial stability or wherewithal to raise anybody, let alone graduate from high school. And so whether or not they could legally consent to anything is questionable. I'm just going to say that if you, at 15 years old, are having designs like that, you were not the first to have those thoughts. Every 15-year-old that's ever been pregnant with anybody has had those thoughts, and they're normal. And I don't know what you are going to think 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I mean, hell, 10 years from now, you're going to be 25. You're going to have a 10-year-old baby out there, whether you're raising it or not. And you're still not going to be fully developed in your brain. Your prefrontal cortex is still going to be developing synapses that are subject to change until you hit about 27 years old. This guy that you're with is not going to be around when you're 21, when you're 25. He's going to be long gone. And, when you know him 10 years from now, he's not going to be anything like what you know him to be right now. And right now, he's a little dipshit. But in 10 years, he might be good or bad. I don't know. He's just a kid that happened to have a girlfriend, and you guys made a baby together. And these are the consequences that you deal with. Hell, my mom had, and she's sitting right here. She had a baby. She had me when she was 16 years old. That's why she's sitting here. She looks like she's 60 years old. She looks like she's like 40. She looks like she's my age. But she was in this I know for a fact that it was contemplated whether or not I would be aborted. Mm-hmm. That was a real discussion that was had. And there was lots of people that had many different opinions about it. What do you have to say to this young girl, Mom?
I have to say, in our situation, I was told that I was going to have an abortion. And I pretty much on my own said, I am not going to do that. But that was my personal decision. I had a connection immediately to where I knew that that's not what I wanted. In regards to this young girl, she already knows that she has no connection and she does not want it. I don't believe that there's anything wrong with giving up her baby for adoption. It's a very selfless action to do on her part because she already knows that it's not what she wants and she's willing to give it up to a family that will love the child. I think that's the best decision for her. I don't think she'll regret it. I think later on, maybe she can revisit this in 20 years. I mean, I know nothing about adoption, but I do believe you don't want to put yourself in a situation where, you know, you're losing. It has to be a personal decision. For me, it was a personal decision that I don't regret, you know. I mean, at all.
Well, this young lady is going through something.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you're 15, I mean, you're a child, but that baby deserves a shot at life.
Yeah.
Too late for abortion. It's not even a question of,
No.
you know, the morality of all of that. This baby is going to be born and they're going to have to fend for themselves at some point and try to manufacture a life out of their deck of cards. And so you, as a 15-year-old with a 16-year-old boyfriend, don't have anything to offer it. You don't.
Right. No, you don't.
To your grandparents, I don't know. Somehow my mom managed. You know, she had lots of help along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of growth on her part. And you're going to have the unique perspective of basically you're growing up alongside of your child. You're not fully developed. You're still growing up yourself. You're trying to raise this child. And it's difficult. And the patience that is required of raising a child is enormous. I don't know how my wife does it. She's at home most of the time with the girls, and the 3 and 4 years old, 3 and 5 years old now. Eliana, between you and your husband, who's chiefly responsible for most of the time taking care of the child?
Right now, it's me,
Mm-hmm.
just because I'm breastfeeding.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from breastfeeding, I think we do a pretty good job about dividing
The responsibilities.
the workload. I mean,
Yeah.
I have to say our situation is a little bit, I guess, different from the norm because he does a lot. It might even be 51% when it comes to taking care, like diapers, keeping track of what she needs, taking her to daycare, all that. I just take care of the, I guess, breastfeeding and nurturing part. But I know it's not common.
Well, most husbands are not equipped to do that, and or have the ability to do that because they got to work.
Yes. No, when my mom came to visit, she was like, "Well, like I've never seen like a man do everything that he does." I'm like,
Yeah, it's not very common, and not only is it not common, most men don't have the ability to do it because of time restraints.
that too.
And at 16, where's he going to work, man? He's going to work at like McDonald's somewhere, work 40 hours a week from what, like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.?
He's probably going to need the support of his family, and he needs to check if his
Yeah.
family is willing to do that. 'Cause-
And they will, but then you introduce like all these third parties with all these opinions, and that's the problem with, it takes a village to raise a child, but, everybody thinks they know best for the child, and that's where conflict arises. I'm dealing with that in so many different cases right now. For this young child and for this young lady, I'll answer the legal question. Can he force you to have the child? No, we can't. Can he force it into adoption? You can put the baby up for adoption if you want. If his family wants to adopt the child, I don't imagine that they wouldn't be able to do that. That's one scenario I could foresee. But the fact, I don't think that anybody could legally force you, minor or not, to be responsible for the child if you don't want it. That is your legal, unalienable right that you have. That if you discard that right, you're the only person that gets to make that decision. Just understand that it might be a situation where if you put this child for adoption, one scenario I could see playing out is that this boy's family wants to adopt. Or maybe your family wants to adopt. Those are questions you guys have to ask, and they should be examined. But if your intent is to 100% give the child up for adoption, that is your choice, and he can't do jack shit about it. He just can't. Let alone he's not he's not an adult. He can't contract to do anything. Nobody could take away your unalienable right to refuse to parent a child that you don't want.
My biggest concern with this, and like it's like a really big red flag, is his perspective that in order to be able to keep the child, like she needs to be involved.
Well,
And I can see that as a manipulative tactic to stay
course.
with her, or at the same time, like it's if it doesn't work out in the relationship, then he's gonna be okay. Then I don't want to be a father anymore.
we cannot save her from any of that. And so that's just going to be something that she has to deal with. That is the scenario she's gotten herself into. She's found herself in a jackpot, and that's what she's going to have to deal with. I will just say legally, no, nobody can force you.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just going to leave it at that. You got a lot to think about, young lady. Do you girls want to do one more, or are we done?
I'm hungry.
Okay.
Like,
With that,
I'm super hungry.
let us wrap it up. Thank you for listening. And if you've been with us from the very beginning, we've been talking for like 3 hours now. I really appreciate you. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you're working out, if you're like in the car driving around, I encourage you, if you're listening to the podcast or the YouTube channel, to subscribe and take the time to rate us and leave a review, because it really helps the podcasting algorithm. If you're new, if you've never seen us before, you're checking us out for maybe the second time because you heard about different episodes that we've done. And then welcome to the family, for one. And there is a lot that we have planned in the upcoming months. I don't think we're going to do another one on Nicole Kessinger. But I will put up a poll about what direction we take next. We may, if there's a reason to come back and revisit this case, then we will. But for right now, I just feel like it's so oversaturated. We don't really have anything additional to add to it other than our legal opinions.
Yeah.
But I have some ideas about where we're going to go, and we'll put up a poll in the coming days. But be sure to leave a comment down below about your opinions about anything we talked about on Family Law After Dark, or about our opinions about what's going on with the Christopher Watts case, about Nicole Kessinger's involvement or non-involvement, or what we've discussed regarding the actual evidence that came out in the discovery file. And if you want to leave conspiracy theories in the comments, I guess go for it. You know, I'm just not going to really participate or have really an opinion about it that's not rooted in actual evidence. And with that, we will see you guys all next week. And we will see you guys. Bye-bye.